Welcome to Unraveling Midlife. I'm your host, Sarah Spence, and today I have a panel for a discussion that continues on from the series that we started in the last episode. Last time I spoke with Dalian, the creator of the self-healing Dalian Method, and today she couldn't be with us for this month's show, so I collected a few of her students that I've been working with too. And so I welcome Megan and Kindi and Jandy to the panel. Welcome everyone. Yeah, we're all in different time zones, so it's quite interesting. We managed to find a time slot that worked for New Zealand and Western Canada and Switzerland. I don't know, one of you, put your hand up. Tell me about how you got involved with this work and a little bit about how it's impacted you. Big question.
We have a chronological thing going in terms of we could start with Jandy, who's been working with Mata the longest.
Yeah,
Sure. Yeah. I first met Mata in 2001 in Vancouver. I went to see her because my brother had been working with her, my younger brother. We were both pretty young. And he wanted me to go see her so badly. He had basically no money and no job, but he wanted to pay for it. And I just realized it was so important to him. And so even though I had no idea what I was getting into, I went. And the session with Mata completely transformed my entire life direction. And took me from being focused on external goals to realizing that I would be missing my life if I didn't focus on knowing who I am. And so it began. And Megan and I had been friends since we were 12. And so I kept kind of tapping her on the shoulder.
Jandy gave me Mata's book when it was
her.
published. It was 2006, 2007,
Yes.
something like that. And
2008.
And I wasn't ready for the book at that point. Like I picked it up and put it down a few times. But actually, that makes me think Kindi should talk next because Kindi has a very great story about the book, like not leaving her alone. So I'll come back to the book on my end. But Kindi, do you want to tell your story?
So mine actually starts in that year that you're making reference to, 2008. It was about yeah, my story also begins in 2008, the year that we just made reference to. I'd been in Canada for about 15, 16 months at that point, and it was really like my midlife crisis, the time where everything was feeling very destabilized. And it was my first opportunity to really get to hear what my mind was saying when I was in the space of not too much busyness. And I had done a lot of reading, like sort of read myself to death almost with so many books, ranging from Eckhart Tolle's New Earth to, Joe Dispenza's work to Gary Renard's forgiveness thing. So it continued on and on, Marianne Williamson's Course of Miracles. And then I got to a point where I was like, no, I'm not going to read anymore because I've exhausted what I think I can do, because it felt like now there was two of me. One was whatever the thoughts were that were going on, and then another version of me that was on top of that, trying to adjust my direction of thinking to somewhere else. And it didn't feel right, so I decided I'm not going to read anything more. And then I happened to be accidentally at Chapters, a bookstore, looking for something for my daughter. And I had too much time on my hands. So I thought I'd go and stand in the New Age section with the promise that I'm not reading any more books, but I'm just there curiously like wasting time. And a book fell off the shelf, and it was entitled In Search of the Miraculous. And it's Mada's book, Healing into Consciousness. And because I'd made that sort of commitment that I'm not going to read any more of these books, I picked it up, it looked beautiful, and I went to try and return it back on the shelf. And as I'm trying to return it back on the shelf, the back end of the book, there's something that catches my eye. And it's a testimonial from someone that says that if you've read Eckhart Tolle's work, it's sort of paraphrased. It said, if you've read Eckhart Tolle's work and you're a bit stuck, then, take this book home. It sort of said that basically to me. I'm like, $25, I'll take it home. And then I got back and I was on the second paragraph of the first chapter, and just tears just started to just roll down my face. Something was saying, wow, like this author really knows, really, really knows. And then I put the book aside 2 paragraphs in and started Google searching. And much to my delight, she was actually in the same town that I had emigrated to because of my midlife crisis. And so that's where my journey began with Mada. October 2008, and it was the 10th of October when I met her. Very transformative.
Yeah, I love Kindi's story with the book falling at her feet. So I like it every time you tell it. And for me, then I had the book, but I was actually doing graduate work at the time. And I recognize now that what was going on for me, even though I had it, and I'd been on a spiritual, journey of my life for a long time in different ways, but I was doing this academic work and I had to keep my brain in a very tight, very academic structured way of working in order to get the graduate work done. And I couldn't dive into the depths and the subtlety of what Mada's work offered and finish the graduate work. I wouldn't have been able to do both. And so it wasn't until I finished the graduate work and sort of closed that part of way of working and let myself be guided into other things. I found myself doing yoga teacher training. I was actually staying with Jandy in Vancouver, and all of this pain erupted in my body, but not the kind of pain where I couldn't function. I could go to yoga teacher training all day, but at night I couldn't sleep. If I rolled over and my knees touched, I woke up in agony. And Jandy knew enough to be able to help guide me a little bit in terms of recognizing it was energy and recognizing like that it was trapped and I just needed to help it move. And then after a few days, she said, you have to talk to Mada. And in the wisdom of the universe, we got in touch with Mada and said, can you see Megan, but like this week, because she's leaving in like 3 days. And Mada said yes. And I went and I had my first session with her, after which I was in a daze. My knees and my shoulders stopped hurting immediately. So like that was good. But the session wasn't about my knees and my shoulders. It was about my soul, actually. It was very much about the direction of my soul and taking responsibility for myself. And 3 weeks later, I was doing research work at an institute. And I remember talking to someone and saying, can I tell you what happened to me 3 weeks ago? Because my whole life has changed and a bunch of things are dissolving. And this feels really massive. And I don't know how to explain it. And the person I talked to, luckily, was of a like mind and was fascinated and was like, yep, I'm the right person. You should talk to me about this. But that first session, the work that we did, and this was 2013, everything that we did that day was permanent. The things that were worked on never came back. The issues that I had never resurfaced. And I'm happy to go into more detail about what that is. But just as a general sense, I knew it was different. I'd done over 20 healing modalities at that point in my life. And I was very deep into the research on like how people perform their belief and what it means to believe something and how we surface that through the body. And here I was doing a healing modality that was all about expressing beliefs, like trapped beliefs. And my whole life changed.
Yeah, and I know I came to this work through Megan, and I think book stories, I was like, how did I get my book? Oh, I think I got it from Megan. Actually, but I had a session with Mada via Zoom earlier that year. Yeah, right, smack bang middle in my astrological midlife. So yeah, I mean, what would you guys say is that I'm going to say je ne sais quoi because I can't even think of the word myself. What is that je ne sais quoi of Mada's work? I mean, you talked, Megan, about that permanent change. You all experienced that, I'm guessing. I see nods.
It
I
is
think
hard to describe, and
yeah.
and there's I think this is also why we keep trying to explain it. We keep talking about it to people, to strangers, to family, to all sorts of people, because it's so different than the other things that we all have tried over the years. And yet it's not a complex thing to do. So now, just because I can sense people going, what are they talking about? You generally, you sit in a chair or you sit with your feet on the floor and you say things out loud and you follow a certain breathing. So that's what I mean by it's not complicated. Like you sit and you say things. But the actual things that are happening inside on an energetic level, that are happening on a multidimensional quantum field, all of that stuff, that's very complex. But the nuts and bolts of it are not difficult. And so part of the thing that is so amazing to me, watching people do it, listening to people describe it after they've experienced it, is this sense that something happened. They know something happened. You know something happened if you've done it. And there's only so much of it you can put into words because it is ineffable. There is this piece of it which is so different than anything else you've experienced, I guess, because it comes down to working with your soul. It comes down to working with the layers of your soul's experience over lifetimes. That's what is coming to me right now. I don't know. Kindi, I know you had something to say.
For me, I think it was touching on a little bit of what you said previously, which is about the permanent change. So really, like I've used the Dalian method on myself, working directly with Mada. It's been used in the family with the children, all three of my kids, has been used actually by my husband too. And when you start describing what the method is able to do for you in terms of the quality of your life and enhancing the quality of your life, the list is so big that that in itself begins to sound like too much. Like, wow, how can one system be capable of making that many profound qualitative changes in your life that range from dealing with health issues to dealing with psychological issues to dealing with your ability to manifest things in this world to dealing with your relationship with yourself and your capacity to stay in your own body in a progressively more and more peaceful state despite what's happening outside of you. When you begin to touch all of the areas of your life that this one method is capable of addressing, it's almost like that one teeny weeny little needle in the haystack that we're all desperately looking for. But if you begin to share all of that too quickly with people, then obviously eyes are going to roll because it sounds a little bit like miraculous. But just like her book is entitled In Search of the Miraculous, Healing into Consciousness, most of us can cognitively understand the phrase in search of the miraculous, but the sub-phrase healing into consciousness is the aspect that I personally couldn't put some context to. And because I couldn't put context to, my mind ran towards the in search of the miraculous. And I know now, this many years on, because I met Mada in 2008 and we're now in 2024, that everything that's altered has been nothing short of miraculous. But it only happened because of this method's capable of expanding consciousness, like this phrase, healing into consciousness. So if you were asking me the question about this technique, I look at it as It's an antiviral program for everything that limits human beings, but it's only an antiviral program because it unearths those limiting aspects that then will help you to touch base with the consciousness that exists inside you and inside the world and in the universe. So it's unique because of that aspect of consciousness change and expansion, and that in itself is why all the changes that are arising are permanent. And they're so appealing because that relationship that we have with ourselves and others and the world and the universe is so important to us.
Yeah, I think consciousness is definitely at the center of what's happening with the Dalian method. It's the key ingredient to health is consciousness. So what the Dalian method does is it gives you access to the root cause of what is preventing you from being fully connected to your true nature. And it does that very quickly by bypassing the mind and giving you access to the limiting beliefs that you have learned through your life, through your lives, multiple lives, that are not true and that keep you in a state of fear and basically disconnected from your true nature. So that's what's really happening with the Dalian method, is that you are directly accessing the underlying cause of what's been limiting you, seeing that it's not yours, that those limiting beliefs are not true, connecting to your true nature, and so totally transforming your limiting beliefs. If you listen to a lot of spiritual teachers, they talk about this, about how everything that you're seeing in your life is a projection, a mirroring of whatever is happening inside you, and that you're responsible for creating your reality. You're manifesting your reality all the time. And people listen to these teachers and they can get some benefit from listening. But if you're just working on the surface level with your mind, you're not going to be able to really transform the beliefs that are running the show in your life. So everything that is in your energy is always manifesting in your life. So if you're experiencing difficult relationships, lack of purpose, difficulty with money, health issues, it's all a direct reflection of what's in your energy. And the things that are causing you suffering are caused by your unconscious energy. So to be able to have a different experience of life, you must be able to work directly with what is in your unconscious, and you can't do that with your mind. So the Dalian method is this brilliant system that gives you a way to directly work with your blind spot, basically the things that you have no idea about that are causing your life to manifest in the ways that limit you, and fully empower yourself. Maybe Megan, you want to say something?
Oh, you're just making me think of an example, because everything,
Yes.
like everything you said is so clear and right on, and I can hear people going, what does that look like in my life? What is she talking about? Or also, to your point, that it's like, what are the things that I'm not aware of? Well, how do you know the things you're not aware of? And one of the things that happens so often when people come, so all of us here on the call today have been trained as facilitators of the method. Because the method is self-healing, we can't do the work for anybody, but we can help facilitate somebody. And I often say it's kind of like, well, why do you need a facilitator? Well, you can buy a book on yoga and you can read the book and you can do yoga at home and you will do yoga, but it's a lot easier if you just go to a class. And then you can learn a bit, and then you can do yoga at home and you can do it with confidence. and this is very similar. We are there to facilitate, just to teach people how to use this method the first couple times to give them confidence in what they're doing. And so often somebody comes to me with their first session and they say, here's what I want to work on. And we start working in it and they go, well, the stuff that's coming up is all about, I'm going to use for example, my father. A lot of times it's to do with parents or childhood. They're like, I already know this. I know this story. I've worked on it in therapy. I've worked on it with this. I've worked on it with that. I've tried this method and that method. And then I say to them, well, you have to say what's coming up. So what's coming up? And they say, it's this old theme about my father. And I said, well, that's what you have to talk about then. And 3 months later, I get a call from the person or an email, and the thing that was the most stuck in their life has now shifted. And part of what we see is that they had worked on the stuff with their parent, with that story, that pattern. They had worked it to death with their mind. They knew it inside out and backward with the mind, but they had not been able to access the unconscious parts that were in their body. And that's what the method did. And so this thing that had kept them stuck in therapy for 10 years was released finally and transformed finally by getting into those unconscious layers in the body. And one person in particular, again, going back to some of the stuff, Jandy, I thought of this person has told me I can talk about their particular case. They had been depressed for basically almost 40 years and had a bad relationship with their parent and had problems with money. And we did one session, and 6 months later, the parent they had problems with was contacting them and wanting to see them. They started having a better relationship with money, and the depression that they had had for basically 40 years. Now, it wasn't, we did a second session. So let's say after 2 sessions, they came back to me about a year and a half later and said they would no longer identify as a depressed person.
Wow.
Right. And those were 2 sessions that were quite far apart, but all of those pieces were interlinked within the system. And they knew their patterns. Oh my goodness, stubborn person. They worked those patterns to the bone. And so actually freeing it from the body was so much easier than all the 20 years of fighting that they'd already done with those patterns.
Yeah, I guess I went to Mara.
And that's a beautiful example of how the...
Oh no, you go.
Sorry. I was going to say that's a beautiful example of how the method actually touches various parts of your life. So in that example, Megan's making reference to depression, which is perceived to be an illness. She's making reference to the relationship with money and what is being manifested in this person's life. So that's, the outer manifestation. And then the quality of life, because that also shifted in the way that the parents were interacting with her or him, whoever this client was. And so that example is a beautiful way to explain how many things can concurrently change for the better through the same technique. And in this case, it was done twice, because it's not even as if it's actually a system that has to be overly used. The gaps between one experience and another can be short, but they can also be fairly wide. My very first experience with Mara was in October 2008, and I asked her, when do I need to come and see you again, if I need to come and see you again? And she said, in 8 months' time, and it completely shocked me. I was like, what? I've got to wait another 8 months for the next layer of this? And she said, no, it's going to take 8 months to integrate and for there to be a shift to happen, and then you'll be ready. And almost like miraculously, again, I keep using that phrase, miraculous. 8 months later, my back was completely stuck and I was frozen in pain. And yes, I was ready for the next layer to work with her directly with a private session at that point.
Yeah, and it's different time for everyone, isn't it? Like my first session was related to like a depressed thing. Like it was like PMS was slowly turning black, like really black. And I was like, this is not me. What the hell? and I didn't know what to do. And then I was talking with Megan, and I'm like, okay, well, I'm willing to give this a go, because I'm willing to give anything a go because nothing's working. And she said it'll be 4 months. And at 3 months, I was like, nothing's changed. And at 4 months, I'm like, oh my God, it's gone. But I think one of the really important bits there is to do the homework, and because there are action steps, and you need to do them for things to work. I had another friend who was able to release a huge thing with a sexual abuse thing in the past, and I think it took her, it was longer. So it's like, but that's working with Marta directly. Like if you're working with a facilitator, maybe things are, a little bit different.
Well, the example Megan gave was of working with a facilitator too. Yeah. And definitely I've experienced the same thing with my clients, people having big transformations in their relationships and their physical issues. And and then the amazing thing, of course, about the Dalian method is people can then do it on their own, right? Like that's, to me, takes it to the next level, because once you learn how to use it, it's yours, as I've often heard Megan put it. It's there for you to take it as far as you want and to empower yourself whenever you want. So it's absolutely brilliant the way that Mata created it in such a empowering way.
Well, and you're making me think of, like, often when I'm talking to people, I'll say I use it, if not every week, then at least every second week, because as soon as I feel uncomfortable in my body, either physically uncomfortable, if my thoughts won't settle, if I don't know what to do, if I just feel emotionally I get I'm moving my shoulders, like sort of that uncomfortable emotional state where you're like, I don't want to feel like this anymore. Or spiritually, if I'm just like, I don't know where my direction is. I suddenly lost my navigation system. It doesn't matter what it is. I can tell. It's like I can suffer for the next hour. I can suffer for the next week. I can just stay in my own sludge and sit here. Or I can get out the method and I will feel better
Reliably.
once I've done the session. Absolutely 100% of the time.
Yes.
I have never felt worse. I have occasionally had to do 2 sessions in order to get through a big theme. But even then, I knew after the first session, like, okay, I just lifted a bunch of stuff with the forklift. There's a little bit more to go, but I've done that piece. And reliably, I think 100% of the time I will feel better. And so in that sense, it's like I can feel crappy for 2 weeks, or I can do an hour with this method. And then the math is so simple.
Yeah.
And it's not like a sugar pill, is it? Like, I know we sound like a marketing team here, but we've got to be careful. But it's not like a sugar pill in the sense that I feel a bit crap right now, so therefore I'm going to run for this, and then it'll come back again. It's not the same issue that's resurfacing at all, even though it might have a similar theme to it. For example, like in my life, the fear to be alone has sort of left me short in so many different parts of my life. As simple as like wanting to go out for a walk. There was a time where the idea of going for a walk alone would have terrified me. It's a very simple thing, and I'm admitting to the fact that there was that type of restriction in the way that I chose to live my life. And now at times, I'll walk out in the dark and it'll be gone midnight or 1 o'clock in the morning, and I just want to be under the stars, and I just want to be out in the fresh air, but actually without people on the planet at that moment, or whatever it might be. And that sense of trembling or terror that used to exist has disappeared. Very small example of like the relationship of being with the idea of being alone. But then there's bigger concepts around the idea of being alone. Like, can we take the leap to be willing to live alone, or to be in a remote place, or to go navigate the forest alone, whatever it might be? or to be in a hotel room alone, or to be able to travel alone. Like, there's so many other nuances that they don't get all addressed in one go, because under that fear to be alone is my fear of my own survival. Like, there's some dread that something might happen. So it's not as simple as just my relationship with the concept of being alone. There'll be other branches that keep coming in. And that's why we reuse the system from time to time, because even though the first session changes something very fundamentally and that issue will not return, on the same theme, we might have more branches to cut later on.
Do you think that the fact, I feel like some people get a bit shocked with the system because you do have to have the courage to face the fears that come up, and there's that background of, in the self-help new age kind of thing, of, oh, affirmations, if I'm positive then the negative stuff won't come up. So there has to be kind of that willingness and courage to go, oh, I'm afraid of this, or I hate myself, or these kind of thought forms that I know over the years of working with this, I've come to peace to go, oh, there's that old chestnut coming up again. But I remember when they first came up, it was like, oh no, like I'm a horrible person because there's all these negative things happening in my thought forms. Yeah, did you guys have that experience when you first came to it, or like you have the courage to?
Yeah, I think it's just so surprising. It's such a because I think before working with Mata and this method, I had never experienced anybody who had a way to work with those things. So the way I look at it is, you're either experiencing all those things all the time in your life through difficult experiences, difficult relationships, difficult career issues, you know, basically the manifestations of all the negative beliefs that you have inside of you. There's no way you're getting away from them. They're in you. That's what creates the people that treat you badly. That's what creates you know, the job that you feel so stuck in. That's what creates the terrible family relationships, or the trauma that you can't be free of. So you're experiencing these things one way or another. So it's an education piece. Like Megan was saying, you can either just be in the suffering for a long time and just, you kind of get used to it and it becomes your norm, and you can not realize or not be aware of the fact that it's possible to actually completely transform it. So instead of just living with it and just being used to, oh yeah, I just have all these relationships where people treat me badly, and this is just the way it is, or I have this job that doesn't satisfy me and it's just the way it is, and I'm you instead of just experiencing it that way, it's like, okay, I'm actually going to work with the unconscious aspects of myself that are creating this by expressing them and experiencing these aspects, these beliefs and feelings inside of myself directly. And yeah, it does take courage, and it's completely different than the way we're all conditioned in this society. This method is advanced. It is beyond the norms that we have grown up knowing as possible. So you have to be willing to take that paradigm shift of, oh, a lot more is possible. And there is this really, really practical way to access the limitless potential of this existence that we're living in. Right. So I think it is a very different method for people. And it's often good for people to have an experience of doing it multiple times. That's what I usually say to my clients, because the first time you're experiencing it, you're just getting used to it. And it's just, it's just so different than anything you would have experienced before. So it really is for people who have a sense that there has to be more. There has to be a way to heal themselves from their pain and suffering that is more effective than what they've already experienced, who kind of have a knowing that there has to be more that's possible, and who are ready to take that leap to actually experience it rather than just continuing with the same old and complaining about it.
And it's a lot of work. Like back to that point, like this is, even though we're saying like, I'll say I'll do it every week and it makes my life so much easier. When you do it, you're facing exactly what you talked about, Sarah. You're facing these dark thoughts. You're facing negative emotions. You're facing things that normally you spend a lot of time and energy repressing. And so, yes, to face those head on, that's why Jandy said it takes courage. It is courageous work. It's hard work. The people in my life who are super spiritual, who have done all the things, a number of them after they did a session with me, looked me square in the eye and went, I would not have done that if you told me how much work it was. Like they were almost like accusing me of like having tricked them into doing hard spiritual work. But it is true. And this aspect that you brought up, Sarah, of saying like we've been trained with affirmations, and we've all had that come up in our sessions with people where you can almost hear them starting to go into the affirmation. I've had people stop partway and go, I don't want to say negative things.
Yeah.
I've been told I can't say negative things. And to break that down, to get them to the point where it's like, it's okay. It's okay to say them. In fact, you can't release them if you don't say them. You're going to hold them if you don't say them out loud. It's such a shift in the way that we
comes with education, doesn't it, Megha? Because so much of the world has begun to put emphasis on the positive side of the mind, as if the negative side of the mind is toxic and it needs to be shunned. But both aspects of the mind, left or right or wrong, negative and positive, are still part of the mind. And so people don't have that education. I remember there was a study that was done in California, and I can't remember which university it was. And I don't even remember the exact cohorts, like what each cohort did, but it was regarding a spider. And so I don't know, a lot of people have this instinct that they're afraid of spiders. And so they tested the responses for each of these different cohorts based on different actions. So one was where they were shown the spider and then shown the spider again. So like the mind had a chance to see the spider, respond, and then see the spider again. And so because you'd got adjusted, the gravity of the fear may not have been as intense. That's what they were hypothesizing might arise. And so they did different groups, and one of the groups was asked to express, I'm afraid of the spider. That was what that part of the experiment was meant to do. And when they analyzed the entire thing, the group that expressed the honest truth, I'm afraid of the spider, that group dissolved the fear the fastest. Whereas every other group, whichever way of mind control they were trying to use to help them to adjust to the experience of the spider, none of it was was a patch on the actual verbalization of the fear. So yes, it takes courage to express your fear, but that experiment alone shows, and we know from our own experience through using the Dalian Method, that experiment alone shows it's the fastest way to then get to the other side of the fear, so that you are in your innate confidence and courage, that then, and you get to a place where, you begin to realize that your power is indestructible. So which one would you want? To be nervous to say and express the fear head on, or would you want to go through the fear to the other side so that you can actually meet that strength and power that resides within you, that there's nothing that I feel can touch that experience when you've had it inside your own body?
Feeling through.
And to me, positivity is really important. And I regard the Dalian method as a way to access the true positivity. And true positivity is the understanding that every single experience you have is for your benefit, and that there's something really, really beneficial for you to gain, for you to learn from every single thing you've experienced, even the most dreadful things you've experienced. And the Dalian method gives you the way to directly access the greatest benefit from the worst things you've experienced. And to me, like, what could be more positive than that? You can actually, with the Dalian method, transform the most horrendous things you've been through in your life into the source of your joy and your power.
And one of the things that's coming up in Jandy saying that, again, I'm thinking of like part of everything that we're talking about. Like she's saying, like the toughest thing in your life, you had to generally we have to repress the hardest things, because we can't hold them in our conscious mind all the time. It's too hard, and so we stick it down in the body, which means it's taking up room. And this is part of understanding, if you get into quantum physics, this whole idea of no energy can be destroyed or created. And so anything in your body that is, everything's made up of energy, it's taking up space. We've all seen the image of the iceberg, this whole idea of our consciousness, and we're about 10% conscious, and there's this little triangle at our head. And then the other 90% of the iceberg is below the water, and that's unconscious. Well, here's the interesting thing. With the Dalian method, all that unconsciousness, which is mostly stuff we're afraid of that we've repressed, we slowly bring that up and we start making more and more of it conscious. So we start shifting that 10%, 90%, and maybe then it becomes 11 and 89. And then it goes down another percent, another percent, another percent. And so we're actually shifting the ratio of conscious versus unconscious energy in the body. And the more conscious energy we have in the body, the easier it becomes to be in the body, the easier it becomes to be human. Because we have more energy, more conscious energy able to connect with intuition, more conscious energy able to connect with our heart, able to connect with the positivity that Jandy just mentioned, more is there so that we can actually change our perception and say, what if that horrible thing that happened to me is a lesson? What if it is something that's for my benefit? Because when we don't have a lot of extra conscious energy in the body, we can't do that. It's too hard. So this is part of what Kindi was talking about, quality of life. Our entire quality of life and our ability to enjoy being here gets high. It's easier and easier the more we do this work and become more conscious. It's not to say it isn't hard work. It's not to say it isn't demanding work, and that we have to face ourselves and who we are and what we've done and the things that scare us the most. But we're all sitting here saying, in Jandy's case, it's been over 20 years. Kindi is coming up, well, getting close to 20, 16 years. I'm at 13 years. And we're all saying our lives have gotten significantly better and continue to get significantly better by doing this. So we think it's really worth it.
Yeah. Yeah, there's certainly been like total life-changing sessions and also incremental sessions. I think it's different for everyone. Yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah. It is different for everyone. Sometimes people say, oh, what if like something's going to come up that I can't handle, and I always say it's a self-healing method, and you're basically determining what comes up. It's going to go at your pace, right? So you are in the driver's seat the whole time through your session. So everybody has the session that they need for what they're experiencing and what they want to learn.
Do you reckon that's a driver's seat in terms of like a conscious or a subconscious? Because I'd probably go for the subconscious.
Well, the subconscious is the conscious that's not quite fully, you're not fully aware of yet, right? So yeah, it's ultimately your consciousness is driving the session. Yeah.
But it's sort of that sense of what is close to the surface. So like often when you do preparation work for a Dalian session, you often will do a body scan because you're looking for places that are painful or sore or drawing your attention in the body, or you're looking for emotions that are drawing your attention or awareness or thoughts. Except you're looking for something that's close to the surface that's easily identifiable, because whatever's close to the surface is trying to get your attention. And the thing that's trying to get your attention is that combo of conscious, unconscious. Like it's coming out of the unconscious just enough to poke its head up to grab your attention. And so that is often the easiest place to start the work. The work can go in all different directions from there, but you, in your other forms of consciousness, you are trying to get your own attention.
But in our education system, we've got so many ways of fixing things that come up, and that is sort of like programmed into our education system. So, for example, if you've got a frozen shoulder, that frozen shoulder is trying to get your attention. But the education system, somewhere there is this general sort of, well, I'll go and get it fixed. I'll go to a doctor, I'll get some surgery, I'll find out what the underlying reason is. But our education system hasn't been advanced enough for us to be shown or taught that actually that frozen shoulder has something to do with your limiting beliefs and something to do with the conditioning that you've been through. And that frozen shoulder has the possibility of movement, not necessarily just through the medical system, where we tend to be giving our power away. There's something more that you can discover about this scenario within yourself. So sometimes when it comes to this type of work, especially with this particular technique, a lot of our work is about helping to educate people to see what more there is to the way that we've already been educated. And we don't know the subtle ways in which we've been programmed to give our power away. You're at school, a teacher is giving you instructions. There's a right and a wrong answer. From a very young age, you're being told right and wrong, but you're not being educated to the beauty of finding an answer from within, and it may not match what someone's perspective of right and wrong is, but it has the color of who you are in the way that you've chosen to express how to go about answering that question. So that's why I like the Dalian Method Find Answers to Your Question version. 17 minutes long, that's not hard work. You pose the question that you're wanting an answer to, and instead of giving that power away to an outside authority to give you an answer of what's right or wrong, you automatically go inside to find your own unique answer. Because even though this method, we're all using it, we're using it in unique ways because our life stories are unique, our belief systems are unique, our cultural conditionings are unique, the countries we were born in were unique. So the same system is being used to unravel unique scenarios for all of us. And with Find Answers to Your Question version of the Dalian Method, you get your answer for that present moment that's relevant to your unique journey.
Yeah.
That's a really powerful one.
Yeah.
And then even just since Kindi brought that one up, like the things that currently exist that Mata has created, they work synergistically together. So you can do a Find Answers, and that might be all you need. That might give you some clarity. That might just give you a little light bulb moment. It will help you to understand better what's going on for you. Or you might get an answer that you then use to start your next Dalian session, a longer adult session, which we've talked about it being 95 minutes or 70 minutes. These are longer sessions. And so these different tools can work together to help you depending on what it is that you're trying to do, or how much time you have that day, or how much space you have without other people around. so that you can do some work without, on your own, because this is a work that is, we generally do it by ourselves, because we're saying stuff out loud, and it's good to be able to be totally free to say the things that normally you don't feel free to say. And that's part of it too. The more you practice, after years and years and years of practicing saying very loudly exactly what you want to say, exactly how you want to say it, you start doing it in public. You start saying things that are true for you in front of other people and in public places in ways you never thought you could, because you're like, well, the world isn't going to end if I say what I think. And you notice the shift in your own behavior, that you have more confidence in just voicing things your way. And that's a beautiful thing for anybody.
Yeah, and it's inspiring for others. They look at you and they go, how is it that you're able to say these things and you get away with it? And yeah. And then you start transforming your life and manifesting situations in your life that are aligned with your true nature. That's how it happens.
Yeah. So, Sarah, do you think we've shed some light on some of the questions that you think would come up?
Yeah, I think so. I think so. Yeah, and I am aware that we will need to wrap up because of our time zone issues. I need to go to my day job. But just on that, like speaking a truth, because like saying what comes through in an unfiltered way. I can think of some examples of people in life who are unfiltered, but in a really negative way. What kind of sense were you guys meaning when you were talking about speaking your truth and just saying, was it in a positive way, in a negative way, or like in a conscious way?
I could give an example of it that's pretty relatable in the workplace. So a lot of times in the workplace, people rely on sort of their boss or the workplace culture to make them, quote, safe to either say or not say what they really think. And then people often feel like a lot of toxicity at work about not being true to themselves, basically. And then they complain about what's going on at work in, side conversations, and, and basically everything just stays the same. It doesn't change. So because while I'm working, I'm doing this inner work, I just realized it was possible for me to say what I think. And because it's not coming from a reaction in me, it's not coming from a place of judgment, it's not coming from an aggression in me, it's just coming from my own inner freedom, which is a harmonious state in me and my own empowerment. It's basically received well, even if it's bringing up a contentious issue. So I would have the experience repeatedly at work where I would be in a meeting and I would say something that is what everybody is thinking. And then all these instant messages pop up on my screen. Jandy, thank you for saying that. Thank you for saying that. Thank you for saying that. And it wasn't just my colleagues who were appreciative of it. The people I was reporting to mentioned to me a number of times in surprising ways that they really appreciated that about me. So I basically ended up having a unifying effect in the workplace by refusing to buy into this lie that it is not possible to empower myself and say the truth. And, I had a lot of really great experiences with that, and people really, really appreciated it.
I love that example, so pertinent, and it actually reminds me that sometimes I'm the person doing that.
Right. Yeah. It's a contribution. When you share your truth, you're actually making a contribution. It's a generous act.
Such quotable quotes, Jandy. Well, it's been just simply lovely to hear all your perspectives and all your wisdom coming through, each of you. Thank you so much for your time. And you're all facilitators, right? So maybe you can give me how people can get hold of you, and I'll stick it in the show notes. And yeah. Yep, I'm going to put lots in the show notes actually, because we've talked about the self-healing Dalian method, we've talked about fine answers to your questions. So, yep, all the text that accompanies the podcast will have a bunch of information in there for you, dear listeners.
Well, thank you for asking us. Since you're doing a whole series on Mata, it's really lovely to be able to contribute some of what we've learned and our appreciation of what she's shared with us and what she's taught us, because it comes because she was willing to speak and to write and to put herself out there and to say, this is worth your time. This is going to make a big difference in your life. And we're all very grateful to her. I know I've heard everyone here say that in their own ways many times, but yeah, for me, it's always back to the gratitude of the work that Mata has put into the world, because it's just changed my life so much for the better.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you, and happy eclipse season. This episode will be dropping on the new moon solar eclipse, and we're recording it in the eclipse portal, so it's an eclipse special.
Very exciting.
I'll just flick it back into the astrology. Yes. Awesome. Thank you so much, guys. Unraveling Midlife is brought to you from Aotearoa, New Zealand by www.sarahmarlowspence.com. Theme music is by Sarah Marlowe Spence and Saraswati Marie Willis, and art by Samantha Hepburn.